Alright, this is KV4UP at 7:30, so that means it's time for the technical forum. This is the W4GSO repeater, 145.15 megahertz, and we do this every Sunday night, so hopefully you're here because you want to be. Name here is Scott, like I said, call sign is KV4UP, and if you haven't been around the tech forum before, it's a time for you to share projects you've been working on, give information about upcoming events, things going on, and it's a great time to ask questions of other people. We're going to do something a little different. Well, I don't know, it's not really that different. Roy last week, N4BYU, suggested a couple things. We're going to maybe start doing one of those tonight. And so hopefully this will be beneficial for people who might not be hams or people who are new. Speaking of that, if you're not a ham or if you're interested in upgrading your ticket, every second Saturday every month there's a VE session. VE stands for Volunteer Examiner. Those are the people who give you the exam. And at Hinshaw United Methodist Church on Gate City Boulevard in Greensboro, they hold a VE session second Saturday. So the next time that happens is going to be Saturday, February the 13th. And testing starts at 9 in the morning. And when you go there, you need to make sure you bring two forms of ID, one of which needs to be a photo ID. And if you are going to, if you're going to take the general test or the extra test, you need to make sure you bring a copy of your original license. They're printed off from the website, and that's the paperwork that they're going to need. They don't have a copy machine there, so don't bring the original and not a copy. Bring a copy too. David, AJ4TF, coordinates that. You can send them an email, aj4tf@arrl.net, to let them know you're coming. It's not absolutely necessary. They do take walk-ins, but it helps them to know how to prepare if you let them know you're going to be there. So it gives you, just under a month. February 13th. It's a little ways away, but it's not too bad. There's also a VE session at the High Point Red Cross building on Phillips Avenue in High Point. David also coordinates that one, so you can send him an email about that also. That's on the last Saturday every month at 10 in the morning. And so the next session for that one will be on January the 30th. That gives you a couple weeks to study up and go out there and take your test. Also, just as a reminder, on this repeater at 9 o'clock is the News and Information Net. Patrick K2CPR holds that, and that features Amateur Radio Newsline. So that'll be coming up here in a little while. So the topic for tonight is a little bit generic, but it's something I think, maybe people listening, Roy mentioned this last week, and I think Cameron did too. There may be people who are listening who aren't licensed yet and may be interested in getting their license. So the topic tonight is how to get your tech license and how to go through that process. I'm not going to go through everything. I think what I would like to do is, so since this is a topic, after we do check-ins, each of us will have a chance to talk about it. I'd like to know what drew you into the hobby and then how you went about studying. In future tech forums we can talk about specific topics that are related to studying for the tech license. But tonight we're going to be a little bit more generic than that. And so I'd like to know how you went about studying, what resources you used, if you used anything in particular. Maybe you went to a class and you talked to, you worked with some other people, all that kind of stuff. And let me just give you an example. So for me, I had heard about ham radio, but I didn't know an awful lot about it. And I just had assumed that it was going to be very expensive because of the type of equipment that was going to be involved. And I had assumed that the tests were going to be very, very challenging and that I wouldn't be able to do, it would be challenging, but I didn't know if it was something I wanted to get into. And it happened that a blog that I read on a regular basis is an Amazon, he's an affiliate, I guess is what you call them, and he put a link to the Bofeng UV5R radio in his blog and talked about, how if you're interested in ham radio, this thing is pretty cheap and you can get into it. And I thought to myself, I had no idea that you could get into it that cheaply, $30 or whatever. So I asked for one of those radios from my mom for Christmas, and she got it for me. But before I could use it, of course, I had to pass the test, so I started looking up, and I actually went and used a website that you have to pay for. What's it called? Oh shoot, I had to look it up. But it was like $24. You go through, it asks you questions. There are a lot of free sites like that ask you questions. This particular one asks you all the tech questions, but it is adaptive, so it'll keep asking you the ones that you get wrong over and over again to try to help focus on those things. And a lot of the stuff for the tech exam I already knew. There were things that I didn't, but so I went through that a number of times until I did very, very well on it. And then I looked at, just Googled ham exams in Greensboro and came across the w4gso.org site and shot Roy an email, and that was the end of it. So I went over to Hinshaw and took the test and got the tech license, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. So that's kind of my story, how I got into it. I didn't really know anybody, and I didn't know much about how to, even after I got my license, I didn't really know much etiquette other than what I was reading about, and then started coming to the GARA meetings, and everybody kind of taught me what I needed to know from there. And this forum, honestly, helped tremendously, because after I got the license, I was able to participate and get a feel for things. So that's the kind of story that I'm looking for tonight, and because that kind of information might help somebody new. So enough blathering from me. I can blather on forever, and I don't really want to do that. So since we're at that point, let's take mobile and low power station check-ins like we always do first, so that if somebody's out there in the car, short timer, we can get them on the air here. So if you're mobile and low power, you know how to check in, but I'm going to go over it anyway. Call forum control, that's me. Unkey to make sure you're not doubling. That means say your call sign, and then let off the push to talk button and release to listen, and then after you've made sure that you're not doubling with anybody else, give your call sign again and your name, and that's how we'll do this. So, mobile or low power stations, if you want to check into the forum tonight, call forum control now. Alright, that's alright. Everybody's either at home, or maybe they're home sleeping after watching the Panthers game. I don't know. It was fairly exciting at the end, but, well, that's good. That's all right. Well, so let's take a regular check-in. So regular check-ins, if you're new to this, regular check-ins work. You'll call forum control, but the way we handle these is by groups. So we take them by the first letter of the suffix of your call sign. So if my call sign is KV4UP, of course, the suffix is the part after the number. So that means that my suffix starts with U. So when we take check-ins for forums or nets, they take them by the first letter of the suffix of the call sign. So I would typically have to wait till the last group if we went forwards through the alphabet. And, for me, I like to call Quebec through Zulu. So that's Q through Z, and that's where U falls in the alphabet, of course. So we're going to go backwards this time. I like to go kind of alternate forwards and backwards. That means so that people with late call signs don't have to wait till the very end, and vice versa. So, if you want to check in the tech forum and the suffix to your call sign starts with Quebec through Zulu, call forum control now to check in.
Forum control. Please check in AJ4TW, Cameron and High Point.
All right, Cameron, it's good to hear you. I was waiting to see. I heard a click. I thought somebody else was going to check in, but I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining us tonight, and I appreciate all the work you've been doing on everything this week, the recording from last week, and whatever you've got going this week. It's great. I think it's awesome. By the way, just before we get to the rest of the check-ins, just in case you didn't know this, Cameron has been recording the tech forums on Sunday nights, and he posts them on YouTube, and then we put them on the w4gso.org website, and you can go back there and listen to them over again. If there was something that you missed or you want to hear it, it's a great resource. Go to w4gso.org, and go to the news page. You'll see previous tech forums on there. So that's pretty awesome. I think it's great. Alright, so let's keep going backwards then. We got Cameron, AJ4TW. Let's go hotel through Papa. If the suffix of your call sign starts with hotel through Papa, call forum control to check in now.
Net control. Please check in Kilo Mike 4 Hotel X-Ray Victor Paul in Northeast Guilford County. Good evening, Scott.
Forum control. Please check in Kilo Bravo 1 Papa Tom in Oak Ridge.
KV4UP. Please check in W4 JCK Chris in Greensboro. Good evening, Scott.
Alright, it's great to hear you guys. Thanks for checking in tonight. Got you, Paul Cam for HXV. Good to hear you as always. You're sounding nice and crisp and clean. And Tom, it's great to hear you, KB1P, coming in from Oak Ridge. You sound great too. Same with you, Chris. Sounds like everything's running well tonight. W4JCK, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Alright, so now let's do Alpha through Golf. If the suffix of your call sign starts with Alpha through Golf, if you want to check in, call forum control now.
I thought I'd give time for somebody else. N4 BYU. November 4, Bravo Yankee United. The name is Roy Pleasant Garden. Hey, Scott.
Alright, Roy, I got you. Good to hear you. November 4, Bravo Yankee United. Boy, you're ugly. That's great. Thanks for being here tonight. We'll see if anybody else comes in a little later. Like I said, maybe everybody's still out partying after the football game or something. So let's take anybody anywhere if you want to join us with the tech forum tonight. If you're out there and you know what, you're riding in the car, we won't take long, I promise. Anybody anywhere, Alpha to Zulu, if you want to join us in the tech forum, call forum control now.
Forum control. 4 Delta Bravo Uniform Northeast Greensboro.
Alright, I think I got that. I got the Delta Bravo uniform. Is that Whiskey 4 W4? Is that what I heard right? And can I get your first name too, please?
It is Whiskey 4 and the handle is Art Abel Roger Terror.
Alright, awesome, Art. That's great. Thank you. It was just a little bit of static, and I think it might have been on the repeater right at the very beginning. It made it just a little bit hard to hear, but you're coming in loud and clear, so thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Well, we'll go back and check and see if anybody else wants to join us in a little while, but we'll go back up to the top of the list, and hopefully you've all heard what the topic is tonight. I think as we get into this in the future, I may start, and it just depends on how I handle this in the future, but I may start talking about a topic for 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning. If we talk about ham radio basics, like that kind of thing. But if you didn't hear what the topic is, let me just remind everybody: it's what got you into ham radio and what you did to study and how you got your tech license. And that may mean different things for different people. Some of it may be dependent on when it happened. But if there were study materials, resources, that kind of thing that really worked for you, love to hear about them. So, and your experience taking the exam too. So let's go back up to the top of the list with Cameron in High Point, AJ4TW. How are things going tonight, Cameron? And how did you get into it?
Things are good, Scott. Good to hear everybody there. Hopefully get a few more check-ins tonight. Before I get started on the tech license, I do want to mention one thing about the club meeting. Not this week, but the next, I think it is, 25th. I'm not sure exactly. But anyway, we're going to do recreate a test that was published in QST, November 2015 QST. The ARRL was doing HT testing, basically spectral purity test on any HT. So I'm going to bring a spectrum analyzer up to the club meeting, and we're going to project it up onto the wall so everybody can see the display really nice and big, and bring your HTs. And we'll test them out and check them out and see how they do with harmonic suppression and stuff like that. If you have an adapter for your HT to attach it to an external antenna, maybe bring that as well to make it easier to connect it up. So yeah, but that should be a lot of fun, and we'll also hopefully have some HTs available, Fusion, DMR, D-Star, and FM, so that we can take a nice look at the way that the signals from those various modes look on the spectrum. So that should be a lot of fun. Bring your HT and we'll check it out. Yeah, and that's the next club meeting. So yep, let me let it drop here. So I got into ham radio back in 2007. My brother Collins, who is now AF7PO, at the time he was KG4OFW, and then he was AB3KC, and now he's AF7PO. So he's had like 3 different call areas, and that's, well, anyway, that's a whole other story. He got into it before me. He got into it, I think, when he was still in college, and he wanted me to get into it. So one year for my birthday, I think he gave me a 2-meter mobile radio, and he said, "Here's a radio. You can listen, but you can't transmit. But get your tech license, and you'll be able to talk to people with it." And so I started doing that. I started listening, and I also ended up getting a scanner, and I was listening to some repeaters with the scanner, and it piqued my interest, and I wanted to be able to talk. So I got a ARRL technician handbook, and I read that. I actually read it in about 3 or 4 nights. Every night when I got in bed, I read a little bit, and my wife thought I was crazy because I usually don't read in the bed, but I was reading this book. And so, yeah, I read that book, and then I took, at the time, and I'm not sure, maybe somebody knows if QRZ.com still has the online practice test, but that's what I did. I took the QRZ.com online practice test over and over. I'd take them, and then I'd say, oh, well, I'm doing really bad in this area, whatever this section is, and then I'd go back to the book and reread that section, and then take the test again. And I kept doing that until I got to the point where I was acing it. And let's see, I went to the Hillsboro Radio Club, had a VE session down there in Hillsboro at a library, and I went down there and passed the test. So we're really lucky here in the Guilford County area that we have 2 tests per month. That's a lot of opportunity to do testing and get your license, so that's pretty cool. But AJ4TW. So, I mean, that's the story for me, and it's probably a common story for a lot of people. Once I got my ticket, I installed the 2-meter radio in the pickup truck I was driving, and I remember making my first contact. I think I talked about that on an earlier tech forum, and I actually got a QSL card for my first contact from John Lloyd, W4JPL, sent me my first QSL card. So anyway, that's it. And yeah, hopefully, I mean, you know, go for it. It's not too difficult. It just takes a little determination. Thanks for doing the net, Scott. Good to hear you tonight, and looking forward to hearing everybody else's stories. This is Cameron, AJ Accord TW in High Point.
Yeah, that's pretty neat, Cameron. That's great. It's neat that your brother pushed you. I've pushed both of my brothers, and they both kind of balk at me a little bit, but that's all right. Maybe someday I'll snag them. And thanks for reminding me. I did mean to mention about the meeting, too. You know, the past couple of weeks, I know that I've been advertising that we're going to have Bob Heil there on Skype with us, and I emailed him to confirm and come to find out that he's going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of Heil Sound at the North American Music Merchandisers, the NAMM show in California that week. So I think he didn't realize it when we had originally booked the time back in December, that was going to be that weekend. So I'm working on rescheduling with him, try to get him back here a little later in the year, May or June, hopefully. So we will have Bob Heil via Skype, but thanks to Cameron and his quick thinking, we'll have the Spectrum Analyzer demonstration, which is going to be very, very cool. I'm looking forward to that. Thanks, Cameron. All right, on to Paul, KM4HXV. Paul, how are you doing, man? What's going on?
Good evening, Scott, and everybody on the net. Just to let everybody know the Broncos just beat the Steelers. I'll give you an update there. As far as the getting involved, it'll be 1 year since I got my tech license, in next month, I believe it is. And so I know there's people out there probably listening to us tonight, because I was one of those guys at one time. One of our guys at our shop in Winston, one of our mechanics, he was a tech and started talking to me about it. He's kind of one of those survivalists and wanted to know if I got involved with ham radio. So I kind of got interested and then won one of those little Bofang HTs off of eBay one night and just got it, like he said, and never transmitted, just listened to it because I didn't have my license yet. Drop. So then after talking to him, he had introduced me to Mike over in Winston, so I went by there and talked to him a couple of times about it and got really interested looking at all the radios in the shop over there and that. And so I attended a GARA meeting, met Roy, and he talked to me about getting my tech. So I kind of did like Cameron did. Actually, the one guy, our mechanic over in Winston, had the book, so I studied it some. And then there's a site that's still operating today. This is how I kind of studied for when I got my general a couple months ago, and it's AA9PW.com. And he does a really good job of putting up the practice tests and changing them, and that's what I did. I just go on there after I studied some and see what my weaknesses were and just kept taking them over and over until I got pretty confident that I could pass the test, and then went over there to the church one Saturday morning and got my tech, and then kind of lagged a little bit, but everybody pushed me, and I got my general, like I said, a couple of months ago, and I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed being a tech, but then I got the HF radio, and I was listening to people talk and communicate, and I really enjoyed our field day. And I said, I've got to get my general. I really need to, because that's really neat. It was driving me crazy to hear people talk, but I couldn't get in there because I wasn't licensed yet. So anybody that's listening and hesitating, don't think you can do it, you can. I'm telling you, it's a lot of fun, a lot of good people, and people will help you out. We'll help you any way we need to get you through it. So I hope some are out there listening, and they'll maybe come to our next meeting. That's it for me, Scott, KM4HXV.
Yeah, Paul, that's great. That's excellent. It's a lot of fun to hear how people got into this. Sometimes you don't know the backstory, what exactly happened, why they chose to get into it in the first place. So that's really neat, and thanks for the encouragement too. I agree. Let's encourage everybody who's out there. There's a camaraderie in ham radio and in the club and with other people around the world that I think there's a singleness of purpose and a camaraderie that it's really hard to beat. So I've had a lot of fun with it, and that's exciting that you're coming up on your 1 year anniversary, and so I've been at it just over 2 years, so not all that long. So there you go. All right, let's go up to Oak Ridge at Tom, KB1P. Tom, how you doing? How did you get into it?
This is KB1P, Tom in Oak Ridge. A while back when I was a kid, 1958, one of my next door neighbors had a ham radio, and I never did listen to his father on it, but my friend always talked about it, and I started getting interested in ham radio at that time. But then I bought. There was an estate sale, and I bought this little shortwave radio receiver for a couple of bucks from the estate sale, and I started listening to shortwave, and I said, maybe I can get an amateur radio license. So I went down to Radio Shack back then, when Radio Shack was really Radio Shack, and bought an amateur license manual, 1958 amateur license manual. Started reading it, and I got overwhelmed because I was only about 10 or 12 years old and couldn't figure out what the heck they were meant, so I just never got a license. But I was always interested in it. And then when I won my lottery and got an all-expense-paid vacation to Southeast Asia, I got lucky enough one time to make a Mars call back to the States, and it piqued my interest. And then one thing's led to another. Went back to college, got a job, went back into the military, and I still, in the back of my mind, was still interested in ham radio, but never got the chance to do it because, when you're working and you have your own business, you don't have any time. And then I had to give up my business when my parents got sick and I was taking care of them. Had nothing to do, so I started to Google ham radio license. And I came across ARRL site, went in and looked at it, went and bought an ARRL technical manual, and just studied from the manual. Then Googled where they give the tests, went and got a test and got my tech license. And the rest is history. That's my story. KB1P, thanks for running the net, Scott. Hello to everybody on the net.
W8CCW.
Hey John, how you doing? This is KB4UP. Did you have a comment about what Tom was saying?
Nope, just a late check-in.
All right, got it. I got you at the end of the list, John. Thanks for being here. Tom, that's pretty neat. One thing that you said that reminded me of something. When I was younger, I think about 4th grade or 3rd grade, I was in the Radio Shack, and they had a little shortwave radio, and I think it was maybe $20, something along the lines of that, and maybe it was $30, and it was one of those things where I had to save money for a while to get it, but I got it, and I was enthralled with that thing. I just thought it was the coolest thing. I was hearing stuff from Russia, lots of stuff from Russia, in the Eastern European countries, and some stuff from South America, and I was like, holy cow, all this stuff's floating around out there. And for whatever reason, it didn't click with me that, I don't even know if I knew about ham radio. And I knew about CB radio back then, but the shortwave was definitely something that piqued my interest too. So that's very cool to hear that there's a bit of a commonality there. I like that. So thanks for sharing that. All right, on to Chris in Greensboro, W4JCK. What's going on, Chris? How did you get into things?
KB4UP, W4JCK in the group. Well, kind of like Tom, I got, started a long time ago. Most of what I generally went through is not really relevant anymore. Like Tom, I got interested in radio through shortwave. Started with an old radio my grandmother had. I think I may have this wrong. Somebody can correct me. I think it was the True Tone brand that Western Auto used to sell. Anyway, it was an AM radio with a second band on it that covered, I think, up to 5 or 6 megahertz or something there, and you could listen to the AM broadcast band, or you could switch the bands and listen to the shortwave bands. I got started with that, and then got a little better receiver as time went on. All this was in the 60s, and it's a long, convoluted thing, but anyway, I got got really interested in all the business with shortwave and antennas and stuff. And there used to be a Lafayette radio store in downtown Greensboro. I don't remember exactly when they opened it up, but got my mom to carry me up there. I think I was maybe 12 at the time, and picked up an ARRL handbook, and started with that. And of course, back then things were a lot different. We had to get most of our information from magazines back then. So I was subscribing to Popular Electronics, and they used to have a ham radio column in there. And I used to read that all the time. And of course, there would be some ads in there for various equipment. Then in the back, there were all the little things you could cut out and send in and get free catalogs, like from Allied and Radio Shack and Lafayette. So I used to get all them catalogs and pour over there those things and all the equipment. Didn't know half of what I was looking at or understand it. But it wasn't until I think 1977 when things finally came together. They were given a little class out at GTI. Sorry, I think it's GTCC now. And a guy, I think if I got it right, his name was Monroe Kennedy. I think it was WB4VKK. Was given a novice class out there, and I thought, boy, that'll be great. I have somebody to teach me the code, because back then you didn't get a tech license without having already gotten a novice license first. So you had to go through and get that novice license before you could get a tech license. So I went to that class every week, and back then to study code, Monroe was right there on the spot to sell us little pre-recorded cassettes, which is what we listened to learn the code back then. So, not to say Monroe was in it for the money, but, he took advantage of every opportunity. But anyway, I took the class, and back then, to get a novice license, usually had to have like an extra class amateur could give the test by himself to someone getting a novice license. There weren't any VEs or anything like that back then. So anyway, I got my novice license that way, and then that was 77, and then occasionally the FCC would send someone to a ham fest, and they would send some field people down to give tests at ham fests. So back then, the technician class license was actually, to get that, you had to have the novice license, and then you took the 50-question general class written test. And if you passed that, you got a tech license. If you passed the 13-word per minute code test, you got your general license. Well, suffice it to say, I didn't pass the code test. But I did pass the written test, and basically that's how I got my tech license, kind of in a roundabout way. And of course, I tried a couple more times to pass the 13-word per minute test over at the Armory over in Winston-Salem when the SEC would come down about twice a year, because still there weren't any VEs back then, so that was either went up to whatever it was, up in Pennsylvania or up in Norfolk or whatever, or you waited till they came to your area and gave tests. So that's about it for most of us old-timers. We also walked to school through 3 feet of snow, and it was about 8 or 9 miles, so we had it pretty tough back then. So that's about it, Scott. So I'll turn it back to you. KV4UK W4JCK.
This is KV4UP with the Tech Forum. That's great, Chris. I know that there's no hyperbole there at all. So I hear everybody corroborates how much snow there was, and walking uphill both ways barefoot. So I know it must be true, because we have many witnesses to the story. So, but that's really neat to hear. How you went through all of that in the stores or in the catalogs and all that kind of stuff. I can relate to that too. I got all sorts of catalogs, had no idea what any of this stuff, and you know what? I probably still don't know what half the stuff in those things are, but I like to look at them anyway. And honestly, that reminds me of when I was younger. My dad he went to a library book sale. They were selling off some of their books, and they had a whole bunch of popular science and popular mechanics magazines from the 30s and 40s bound up into volumes, and he bought some of those. And I was a kid, I mean, you know, that I was way after that, after the 40s, you know, 40 or 50 years after that, but I looked through there, and just to see the stuff that everybody was coming up with, there was stuff in there that still seemed like it was space age, even 40 years later. So I really appreciated that, and it just seemed fantastic, and I think we all can relate to that some way or another. So thanks for sharing all that. That's really great. I love to hear it. All right, on to N4 BYU, Mr. Roy, down in Pleasant Garden. How you doing, Roy?
Well, good evening, Scott. All I can say to Chris, ditto, 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 ditto. Okay, I said everything I need to say. I'm going to have to start checking in before Chris, because he took everything away from me. A couple of, I think, finer points. We did not have the questions and answers back then. You read the book, and I always said we learned a little bit. And we have smart people now. I'm not putting any of them down, but everybody reads the questions, memorizes the answers, and next week you're an extra. Not that we knew any more, but we did have to read the ARRL manual, and I think we learned a little bit more, and we went in cold with the questions, and I had no idea. And Chuck Bino, instead of Monroe Kennedy, Chuck Bino was the one that made me. Chuck at the time was a Tech dealer, and he made us. He made a bunch of us. Between Monroe and Chuck, I guess probably half of Greensboro. There was something else. Oh, yeah, the FCC came to the this area. I can't remember what it's called, district or what. Winston-Salem, Charlotte, and Wilmington once a quarter, I believe. And I think, here again, I'm not shooting the young ones down, but being in Winston, we would all get in the car, and we were together, and a carload would go to Winston, take the test, and then coming back, we would discuss what we failed. Passed, because we all passed. None of us ever failed. And so I feel we were closer together back then. But I went to Roanoke to take the 13 word, and well, I'll tell that later. I was late. If you wasn't there on time, there was no 5 minutes. You was either there or you wasn't. And not like today. I mean, I'm not, no, like I say, that's just the FCC. And Chris, do you remember Mary? Was she as beautiful as I remember? And who, if I may direct a question to Chris, who was the guy that made the first questions and answer and started selling them? And I think that was the beginning of the questions and answer pool. If I may, Scott, Chris, do you remember who he was?
Probably not specifically who you're thinking of. One of the first things I saw, and I can't remember how far back it was. I think it was in 73 magazine when I saw the first ad. It was one of them Gordon West products. Is about maybe I think the first time I saw it, but that probably wasn't the origin of it.
Different Chris, but I got the answer.
Well, I said Chris. The wrong one jumped in. Hey, Chris, who was he?
It was Dick Bash. and it was late 1970s he started doing that. He started polling the people as they came out of the test sessions and would write down the questions and the answers. And he was the first one to publish everything he could get his hands on. K4HC.
Yeah, yep, that was him, Dick Bass. I had forgotten his name, but I consider him the start of the questions and answer pool. I had my hands on them, but I did not know that it was legitimate, so I did not use them. If I'd known, I would have, but I didn't know who he was at the time, and it was illegal. So, anyway, that's about it. And me, Chris, and Chris came in about the same time. So, Chris is older than I am, though. And for BYU. Go ahead, Scott.
That's awesome. That was a great conversation. I appreciate you bringing those other guys in. You know, just getting a little of that history and seeing how things evolved and changed over time is fascinating. I don't know. Some people don't like history. They kind of balk at it. They don't think there's much to be learned or much useful in it. But I really think that's cool. I honestly feel like that enhances my understanding of the whole hobby just by knowing some of that stuff. So I appreciate you bringing it up and mentioning it. That's very, very neat. All right, let's move on to Art, W4DBU. Art, thanks for joining us tonight. How are you doing, and how did you get into it?
Okay, Scott. Well, it started out in Boy Scouts. I think it was your first class rank. You had to learn the Morse code. So got the Morse code learned, and then a friend of mine and I, we started sending it back and forth to each other. And I think it must have been in the 50s. I got my novice license, but I couldn't do the 13 words a minute, so kept practicing that. And then it must have been 1953, went over to Winston-Salem High School and took the general written course questions as well as the code test, and I passed that in 1953 as W4DBU, which I've had ever since. And about that time, I built a Heathkit AT1, little tiny CW. Built a Heathkit AT1. I think it had a 6146 tube in it, and a Hallicrafter's receiver, SB40, I think it was. So I've been trucking along ever since, and here in the last few years I've gotten into 2 meters, which I'm really enjoying because you get more eyeballs in that way. Okay, I'm over here in northeast Greensboro, and my constant companion is Jefferson, the 16-year-old cat. This is W4DBU.
Wow, that's great, Art. That's a great story too, and I think that's really fantastic that you had a friend that you sent the code back and forth with in order to learn it. That seems like it really would be a good way to do it, you know, to have someone at the other end of the room and just tap it out and force you to try to communicate that way. I think that just seems like it'd be a lot of fun. Maybe a unique way to force you to study it. So that's great. Thanks for joining us tonight. I really appreciate the information and look forward to hearing from you again. All right, let's go down to Pleasant Garden. I got John a little bit ago, and we got Chris on internet-style check-in. He'll come after John. W8CCW. John, how's it going, and how did you get into things?
This is W8CCW. In the 8th grade, which would have been about 1950-something, my teacher brought, my science teacher, science and math, brought a transmitter and a receiver to the school for the last week of school. The condition was we had to all be finished with our schoolwork, and we were going to study some interesting things. And I believe The 80-meter antenna was strung up about 8 feet off of the ground, and we did make a few contacts. And with that, maybe 10 years later, when I was 20 years old, about 1960, the bug hadn't died, and I finally managed to scrape together enough money that it looked like I was going to be able to buy something that would work. And I looked up W8 Baker How Easy and called him. I went over to his house and took the test under his tutelage, and after that it was all history. Although a couple of years later, after I got married, he also hired my wife as a new teacher. But let me reset the timer here one time. The rest of it, let me get the timer. It's worrying me. The rest of the story is that, you know, looking at the test back then, the code was really the hard part. The rules were kind of like rules today, and there weren't as many of them. And we had this other thing. You know, we did not have transistors before that time that's readily available on the open market. I knew a fella who had built a transistor radio. He was an instructor in a TV school that I had managed to get into. But we got a whole lot more to learn nowadays. And at any rate, what I really wanted to say is, last week I said on this network that I didn't like messing with amplifiers because it was so messy to tune up a antenna, and it was just one more thing to mess with. And since then, my wife has encouraged me, and I took it to heart. I bought an LDG AT1000 Pro 2 auto tuner. It was a bunch of bucks, about not quite 500, I don't believe. Timer reset here. And the wife is paging me here as well. But that tuner, I'm on the radio, Joan. I'll be right with you. That tuner tunes very, very fast. It makes a rattling noise. It only takes about 2 amps of 12-volt V power to run. And where I would have said before that I didn't have a 160 antenna, I find out that this thing will tune up things I didn't know about because it's got a computer in it and it runs quite fast. So I now am on 160 meters because this will tune the 3-band fan antenna. And I don't quite know that I've got the picture painted there, but what I'm saying is you got to check out what's current before you take my advice, that's for sure. So go ahead, Scott, W8CCW.
All right, John, it's KB4EP with the Tech Forum. That is, well, that's fantastic news. Congratulations on that tuner. That's really, really neat, and it's a lot of fun that you're going to be able to tune up in a band you haven't been on before. How fun is that? It's like getting 2 or 3 presents all wrapped up into one. And that's really neat that your 8th grade teacher did that. You know, as you were talking about that, I was sitting here thinking to myself that I remember 7th and 8th grade. I was in the science club and I did some stuff with them. I don't remember doing anything with radios, but you know, you think to yourself, okay, this day and age we have the internet, and So I wonder if showing the radio to 8th graders would even mean anything to them anymore. And you know what? I kind of still think it would, at least for people maybe who are wired like I am. The internet is great, and I have some people say to me, you know, why would you ever do that? You know, we have the internet, we can talk to people all around the world, and I just ask them, well, when was the last time you talked to somebody in Poland or in Uruguay or some other country? And it's like, we never have. Well, that's kind of the beauty of this. That's what makes it so fun and interesting. And I can just imagine myself sitting in that 8th grade class listening to the teacher when watching the demonstration of that, and being in awe today of what you can accomplish with a fairly simple setup. So that's very neat. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. And again, congratulations on the tune. That sounds like that's going to be a lot of fun for you. All right, let's go on to K4HC. Chris over here in Greensboro, just up the road from me. Chris, what's going on tonight?
Oh, good evening, Scott, and everybody else on the net. This is Chris, K4HC, up in northwest Greensboro. And I was tuned in a little bit late, and I was sitting there listening to the stories, and the words that were coming to mind were young whippersnappers. And then Chris came on, and Art, and Roy, and then John. So I guess I got to withhold that young whippersnappers part. Now, Chris, JCK, and Roy, and myself all got licensed around the same time. Roy and I were in the same class. It was taught by Chuck Bino, not Monroe Kennedy, but I knew Monroe back in the day. I guess I was the class session before Chris went through it, because my license was from late 1976. Anyway, my dad discovered the class. He had a long-term unfulfilled interest in ham radio, and he had discovered the class, and I think he was looking for a way to connect with a 14-year-old, and asked me if I'd like to tag along with him. And it sounded interesting, so I did. And very similar stories to Chris and Roy. And you go in a general class or above could give you your novice test. First they gave you your code test. They sent that off saying you had passed the code, and then a couple of weeks later you got a written test back. You had to go sit down and take it in front of the guy. He'd put it in the envelope, mail it back to the FCC. They would grade it. Only the time you knew when you passed is when your license showed up, or you got a letter saying sorry you failed. And that process, so at that time, was taking several weeks. I want to say 8 to 12 weeks. Proctored by the FCC, you had to pass those elements in front of them. So I had to retake the code test. First time I tried to do it for, I think it was the technician. And my dad and I had gone down to, I want to say it was the Shelby Hamfest, although it may have been Charlotte. Stayed the night before and was practicing, and turns out the FCC examiner came by and was watching us because we were in a hotel room, door was open. A couple other guys that were down there to take the test were there. We were doing some code practice. And he watched, and the next morning, he was the guy giving the exam, and I blew it. And he says, you copied it last night. I know you can do it, but you missed it here. Go back, work a little bit more. Let me reset. So I did, and worked a little bit more and upgraded to general before I got out of high school, and joined the Coast Guard, and finally upgraded to extra, and, well, as has been said, the rest is kind of history. It's been a lot of fun. Almost 40 years. 40 years towards the end of this year sometime. Got to dig out the old novice license and see exactly when it was issued, but coming up on 40 years real quick. Man, time flies. I don't feel like I'm that old. I don't really have anything else to add except that, it's very similar to some of the other old timers, and it's been fun. It still is fun. Back to you, KV4UP, K4HC.
KV4UP with the tech forum. Chris, congratulations on the 40 years, man. That's very, very cool. And congratulations on sticking with it. I think that if that had happened to me, I think I would have stuck with it, but I think it probably would have discouraged me a little bit. And I don't know whether it did you or not, but good on you for doing that. That's really great. And, I think there are a couple lessons there for people who may not be licensed yet, who may be listening. One is that we have the questions and answers now, which do make things easier. And I think that I think it was John who made the point that there is probably some additional information that everybody needs to know. Who knows? It may balance out in the end, but a little bit of time and effort is going to be required. But the moral of the story is that it's definitely worth it. You've been around doing this for 40 years now or so, and it's been a lifelong hobby. You've made lifelong friends. It's fantastic to me that you remember the names of these guys who gave these classes to you, and they obviously made an impression. There are plenty of people that I've had in my life, years and years ago, who didn't make that kind of impression on me to where I remember their names and facts about them. So I think that's a really neat thing, that what you can say about the hobby is it's given you lifelong friends and the ability to learn and have aspirations for gaining 8-band DXCC and all those kinds of things. It's given you goals and things to work towards, and there's a lot of really, really neat things about it. So for those who may be listening who aren't, hopefully that's an encouragement to you to go ahead and to study and seek us out. Come to the meeting, the GARE meeting on the 25th. Talk to some people. Get to know us. Get to know the information. The information is so useful. There are times in my day job where I use information I learned from it, and in my other job, it comes up, and the discipline to learn how to do it is a big part of it too. So anyway, let's see if we have any more check-ins. Thanks, guys. Let's see if anybody else wants to check in the tech forum. Anybody anywhere, Alpha the Zulu. If you want to check in and call forum control now, we'll get you in.
Forum control. KD4ENV. Echo November Victor. Ron in Walkertown. In and out.
KB1P recheck.
All right, thanks, Ron. I got you on an in and out. KD4ENV, thanks for being here tonight. And go ahead, Tom, I got you. What's going on?
This is KB1P Tom in Oak Ridge. Everybody was talking. I went into my radio files and found the amateur radio license manual put out by ARRL in 1958, which I still have, which was given to me by my mother when I got out of the military. I will be glad to bring it to the next meeting if people could look at it, and you'd be amazed at some of the questions they ask and all the license procedures which have been discussed so far today. Back to you, Scott, KB1P.
And for BYU.
Go ahead, Roy, what's up?
Scott, I've been trying to get somebody to record, write down with Chris and myself, local, and John, and who was just here, the Bostonian. They were around different places, but I kind of wish that somebody would write. I'm not a writer, I can tell you about it, but write a little bit of history of Greensboro. The W4GG Radio Club was at the intersection of Friendly and Market, and they dissolved in about 77, and that is when GARA, and shortly thereafter, day before, gas formed, and I don't know where Art came up from, but he's around before we were. But the three of us, Chris, myself, came up here, and I'd like somebody to write that down for history and for BYU.
All right, Roy, maybe we can work something out. Maybe the kind of thing where what we do is some sort of maybe you can make a recording and tell the story, and then it can be transcribed somehow, or we could sit down and take notes and transcribe it. That would be pretty neat to have some sort of a historical narrative of the way the clubs were, how things were in Greensboro, and how they've transpired over the years. So, yeah, let's keep the dialogue open, and I don't mind helping if I have a little free time. Maybe we can get a couple other guys involved too. Maybe we can put something on the website that go in the forums and get a couple people to volunteer, and we can transcribe something or write from notes or whatever. That'd be fun. Yeah, let's keep that going. Sounds like a good idea. All right, well, so let's see here. I don't think we have any more rechecks. Let's see if anybody else wants to join us real quick before we close it down. We have a half hour till the news and information net starts. So if you want to check in and be part of the discussion, call Forum Control now.
W8CCW recheck.
Forum Control. K2CPR, Patrick in Greensboro.
All right, Patrick, I got you. Let me go back to John here real quick, and then we'll come over to you. John, what's going on?
Well, the folks that have lived here all their lives do not realize just how rich the history is in this area. And, you know, once it's destroyed, it's destroyed. It's gone forever. Here locally, they have been parceling out bits and pieces of hardware from a house that was used. It was a doctor's house during the Civil War, and he had room for half a dozen patients in his little hospital there. But the old house has fallen down. It's got to go, and they're having trouble getting rid of the hardware, I think. And a friend of mine took me through a barn, which has since been torn down, but there used to be acetylene lights in that barn, and it was powered by an acetylene generator, which was dug up and got rid of. Calcium carbonate, I believe, is the material that was used. This area was known for, particularly north of here, for the production of calcium carbide for acetylene. And all of these things are just disappearing, but they're here, and I can't believe nobody is interested in this history. But like Roy, I can point to them, but I really can't do it justice to try to write. So think about your history. Oh, and I have a bag that's been entrusted to me of Julian history, which I have found a gal that I think is going to take it to for safekeeping. W8CCW. Just think about it, guys.
Oh, that's very cool, John. That's pretty neat. Yeah, calcium carbide, that used to be used in a lot of different things. Bicycle lamps, headlamps, mining, all sorts of things. So, and, you know, maybe it sounds to me like we need to get you involved if we start this kind of a project. Somehow we get you involved in it, too, so you can lend your thoughts and memories. It sounds pretty cool. All right, let's go over to Patrick, K2CPR. How's it going, Patrick? How did you get into things?
Sorry, what was your last question, Scott?
Oh, I wasn't sure how long you've been around to hear what the topic is. The topic tonight is how you got into ham radio, and specifically kind of, you know, some of it might be what your motivations and interests were that got you into it, and then what you did in order to study for the exam and how that whole process worked.
Oh, boy, okay. I'm portable, so real quick, how's my signal?
You're pretty good. You're coming in strong.
Very good. Let's see. Well, I was 12 years old. I found my dad's CB in the basement, old 23-channel Craco. He told me we didn't have an antenna for it. A couple months later, we're at a church fair in the basement, and I see this magnet mount CB antenna, brand new in the package, for sale for $5. Dad, I found a CB antenna. That's how it all got started. Before long, we had a base station. We had one in my dad's car, one in my mom's car. I had cousins, older than my mom's cousins, actually, two of my mom's cousins that were big into CB, and then they went and got their ham license, and I was like, well, what's this all about? I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Let me go and do that. So, studied for my novice, passed the novice written, passed the 5 words per minute, and then went back about a month later, passed the tech written, waited about 4 months for my license to come in the mail, and then I was able to operate as a tech plus the day it came in, because I had the CSCE, and I had to wait another month or so for the technician license to come in the mail so I could stop using the KT suffix after the end of my call sign. That's pretty much how I got into it. And I nominate Roy to record the history of ham radio in Greensboro. Since he came up with the idea, who better to do it than him? K2CPR, back to net control.
Well, that's great. That's neat, Patrick. Yeah, that I feel similarities with that also. You know, I was talking to earlier about Tom and shortwave radio. I had a couple CBHTs when I was an early teenager, because I thought it was neat that you could communicate over distance, and of course that was before cell phones and all that. And I put a CB radio in my car when I was in high school, and I think everybody thought I was a big dork. If I had known about ham radio at the time, I probably would have had an HF radio or 2-meter radio or something in my car. I'd have had anything in there if I knew about it. But for whatever reason, you know, it never really translated until later. But that's very neat, and it's cool that your parents kind of helped usher you and encourage you to do that too. That's not always the case. I tried to do that with my son. He's not quite into it yet. My other two might get into it a little bit more. We'll have to see. But yeah, definitely family building. So that's fantastic. Thanks for joining us, and you got a net coming up here in a few minutes. So. Well, so that being said, unless anybody's got anything else, I'm going to go ahead and close her down, and so we can get ready for the news and information net here in a little bit. Does anybody else have anything to add before we go away for a little bit? All right, not hearing anything. So thanks so much for being here tonight. That was an excellent discussion, and I just love hearing all that stuff, and hearing the personal stories about how you all got into it, and the relationships you built, and so many people think it's just about technology, and it's really not. It is, but the technology enables the relationships, right? I mean, that's what makes it fun and interesting, is the people. So I appreciate all of you, and I really appreciate and thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you have a great evening and a great week coming up, and like I said, the news and information net is coming up here in about 23 minutes, so stick around for that. So, for now, this is KV4UP, saying 73, have a great week, and I'll close the tech forum and return the repeater to normal operation. Have a great week.
One comment, not particularly to you, but if somebody gets on the repeater you don't know, speak to them, welcome them to Greensboro, ask them if they're passing through or live here, let them know the repeater works. Lie to them if you want to. Tell them you're pulling in McDonald's, getting coffee, and you only got a minute if you don't want to talk to them. Let them know the repeater works. I've heard 2 new ones in the last couple of days, and I gave time for somebody to come in, and nobody spoke to them. One of them belongs to the club now. The other was passing through from Raleigh to Winston. And for BYU, getting off the high horse.
Yeah, Roy, I concur. This is Scott, KV4UP. I just want to say that I know I've mentioned this on this forum before, or on the forum before. I guess we're done now. I've traveled through a lot of towns, and I know other guys have corroborated this. You go through town to town to town to town to town, and you program the repeater in your radio, and you go through and you put your call out, and you never hear anything, ever. So many of them are dead. I don't feel like this repeater is like that. I think it's relatively well used. Of course, during the middle of the day, if people are at work or whatever, maybe some times where it's not as well used, but I feel like we have a good community on this repeater in this town, and I agree with Roy. It's good to keep it up and let everybody know that we're here. And I think we have a pretty good reputation of it too. So thanks, Roy. Appreciate your work and everything that you do for this hobby in this area. See you in a little bit, KV4UP.
Mr. Smith.